Were you listening to me, or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Zareth Prevails. Folks, real talk here. I messed up on the mechanics for the Tenacity video. I hate that I did that. I was really tired when I did it, and unfortunately, I even knew the mechanics. I misrepresented them, and so we need to do a correction video. This actually hurts my clicks and everything, but I find that I really, really value having credibility over clicks. So we're going to redo this. The latter part of the video is going to remain the same. I am trying to make everything louder because people had feedback in the comments that they wanted it louder. We're going to try that. So we're doing that. First, I do want to point out or request, please guys, hit that like button. Even if you did it for the other video, I would really appreciate it. It helps us get on the algorithm. It has been amazing. Hit like, make a comment, hit the subscribe button, please. And thank you. You guys have been amazing at that. And now, first, I have a short that I want to do, a sketch, whatever you want to call it. You can always give me feedback on it and all of that. Would love to hear what you guys think of it. So let's go for that first. Talks basically about how Tenacity works. Hello everyone. Let's talk about Tenacity. Tenacity is when an attacker wants to debuff someone and that someone doesn't want the debuff. Tenacity is what helps them say no. Just say no to debuffs. Tenacity doesn't actually suck. If someone told you that Tenacity sucks, that person probably sucks. Tenacity is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Tenacity is not a contraction for Tenacity. Before we talk more about Tenacity, we need to talk about an ability's chance to proc. Proc is just a gaming term to describe something happening. For instance, if I walk into a room with females, there's a 90% chance to proc their attraction. I know that sounds unreasonable, but this is based on scientific evidence and testing that has gone on for years. Now, in the case of this game, you can see Jedi Knight Anakin's basic attack has an 80% chance to inflict healing immunity and buff immunity. So what's actually happening here is before you take a Tenacity check, before you take a potency check, you have to see if this ability will even proc. So at first you see you have an 80% chance, so 4 out of 5 times the ability will work as intended, and then you march into the Tenacity versus potency check. So first you have to see if the ability procs, then we're going to see if the debuff actually sticks when you compare potency versus Tenacity, as you'll see in a moment. So how does Tenacity work? You take the attacker potency, the defender Tenacity, you apply math, and you have the chance that it actually happens. This is, of course, after proc happens. So let's see the formula on the very bottom of the screen. Here's a gruesome example. Jane is a witch, and Jim wants to set her on fire. Jim's potency is 20%, and Jane's Tenacity is 100%. Jim has a 20% chance to burn Jane. See the math on the bottom. Here's the bottom line. If the defender's Tenacity is 100 more than the attacker's potency, the debuff can't occur. And unless a debuff is irresistible, there is always a 15% chance to resist. You can see Kylo Ren Unmasked's ability, his first special, that at the bottom, this attack can't be evaded, and more importantly, resisted. This is the stun for 2 turns. It's pretty fancy. Tenacity up and Tenacity down as buff and debuff are pretty straightforward. The debuff, Tenacity down, if it's applied to a character, will allow an attacker to apply any debuff. This is oversimplified. It's actually adding something around 5,000% tenacity or potency to your opponent, and the Tenacity up buff actually adds about 5,000 tenacity to the defender. However, there's still a 15% chance, there is always a 15% chance to resist a debuff. One final thing, as I mentioned before, a character always has a 15% chance to resist a debuff. However, this only happens if potency would normally overwhelm tenacity. If your tenacity is already really high compared to the opponent's potency, this 15% doesn't come into play at all. I hope you enjoyed fun with tenacity. Alright folks, hope you liked it. Give him feedback if you haven't already in the previous video. Really appreciate it, folks. So, first we need to talk a little bit about how to apply tenacity to characters, how it's relevant on characters, because people tend to malign tenacity. I think that there are specific instances where you really need a lot of tenacity and other instances where it's a total waste. So we're going to talk about that. I want to say first, tenacity is something you need to be very intentional about applying. If you just add 20 tenacity, or potency for that matter, but tenacity more, 20 tenacity doesn't do anything for anyone. You need something around 150 or more tenacity to even make an impact because of the way the math works. You guys can watch that sketch. Again, I'm going to be uploading it to YouTube as well, so you can watch it as a one-off if you want. But that being said, you need your tenacity to be high, and you need to have a specific reason for it. You don't just want a random character to have a bunch of tenacity, because there's a lot of ways to kind of mitigate debuffs other than using the tenacity stat. So let's go to the gameplay thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about how to... we'll go to the top here. We're going to talk a little bit about which characters want tenacity. And you guys can tell me in the comments below which ones I missed, but I'm sure I'm going to miss some. So we're going to do quick hitters here, folks. So Hux, if you're facing a team with Jedi Master Luke, he tries to do the F-Lux ability right away. If you don't have a high tenacity on Hux, then he's going to get ability blocked. Now, if you've got 205% tenacity, if he's not debuffed, he can immediately send Supreme Leader Kylo into a murderous rampage because he can cleanse his debuffs as well. So Hux at high tenacity, really great. Get him over 200. It's not that hard. Darth Malak, you can put high tenacity on him if you want to use him to solo things. The biggest thing for him is trying to solo teams like Padme, where Padme have different abilities that are going to mess with him. Her stun and Anakin's healing immunity are the two that you really have to look out for. And if you have a really high tenacity, he's going to be able to solo them. You can see that I put defense sets on him. A lot of people are questioning why. I'm questioning why too. This is kind of just a transition set, but you can get him over 200% tenacity relatively easily. Wampa is a character that relies on being able to counter. He needs to be able to counter, he needs to gain turn meter, and if he's dazed or stunned, he can't really do that. Stunned, obviously you can gain turn meter, but you're not going to get a turn at the end of that. So, what happens with Wampa, you want to put tenacity on him if you use him a lot, unless you have a character that's going to keep those debuffs off. But what happens is he gains, when he gets protection up, so you use Icebreaker, he gains protection up using this Icebreaker, and then using that protection up when he has... Oh, is this the wrong one? Let's see. That's probably the wrong one. Yeah, when he has protection up, he gains plus 50% tenacity. So he gets 50% tenacity there. He's going to have 50% tenacity base right around. Yep, exactly 50%. So if you give him another 50%, it's not hard. Just give him a cross and the two that are health for me. But the secondary, that'll be just fine. Geobrute Alpha is actually a great one, especially if you're going to be facing Vader. If Vader can't apply debuffs, then he's even more screwed than he currently is. I know that there's been a lot of talk about how he's been limited, and he's limited to just Geos, but I'm here to tell you that if you can't debuff the Geobrute Alpha, the Vader comp can be a huge headache. The way that it works here is the Geobrute Alpha has 60% tenacity on the kit, and then on top of that, another 50% tenacity built in from gear and everything. So that's 110 base. You can easily gain another 35 from the cross and another 60% from tenacity sets if you want to do that. Even if you only add another 55 from the cross and one tenacity set, that's going to make the Geobrute Alpha extremely difficult to debuff for some Vaders. And that could be a difference maker. It could also work against Night Sisters. There are a lot of teams that Brute Alpha does not want to have debuffs stuck to. Nest is kind of a more generalized character. This is kind of the classic load up on tenacity and go. Nest is good at soloing characters, but as a solo character, she can't be allowed to be. She can't be stunned. She can't be dazed. And there's a lot of teams out there that are just going to do that to her now. Her use is declining in the upper levels of the game, but mid game and below, she is incredibly useful. You want to give her as much tenacity as possible. You can see 164%, pretty wonderful for her. And then you put offense on her and she can solo teams. You can also give her more tenacity via other means, but her kit is great for being able to solo characters, and getting her to high tenacity is one piece of the puzzle. Hux is someone we've already talked about and doesn't deserve even one more word. Jolie has another use for tenacity. He doesn't care as much about getting debuffed because he's on a team full of guys who can dispel and give him tenacity up. But what he really wants, and the thing that a lot of people miss, is that Jolie has 100% tenacity and he's immune to turn meter reduction. That's fine. People see that. What people don't notice is, in addition, at the start of the battle, he gains bonus crit avoid equal to half his tenacity. Now, what that means for him is that his crit avoid is going to be against 100% tenacity. If you give him more tenacity, I think I've given him around 100. Yeah, so he has 100 on top of that kit. He's got 200 tenacity. That means his crit avoid percent right now is at 100% because he's 200 tenacity. Now, on top of that, you give him a crit avoid arrow, and then if you give him relics, he also gains some crit avoid. And so what this means is even General Grievous, who reduces my crit avoid by quite a bit, even General Grievous can't crit me, and he is just a huge, awesome tank he's not going to get ability blocked or anything. He's just going to revive people when he wants, as long as he lives. Traya is someone who's a little more old school in terms of trying to make her tenacity high. It used to be that Jedi Revan had trouble killing Traya if you had high enough tenacity on her. If you could make it so that his team couldn't actually proc the debuff to, she'll have protection up, and so he's able to reduce her max health if he passes a potency check on her. If you put a lot of tenacity on her, then she's going to resist that, and Jedi Revan's going to struggle. Now, this was changed a little bit by the fact that Bastila was given an ability to give everyone a ton of potency that will overwhelm Treya's tenacity. But the other nice thing about Traya having tenacity is sometimes it can be inconvenient. Sometimes she does dispel her own team members' debuffs, but at times that's not going to be enough. If they get healing immunity on someone and you want to heal them, you can't actually do that until that character takes a turn. So having tenacity on her, probably an outdated thing, but she is a very good tanky character with tenacity. It can be okay. Now, the Kylo Ren Unmasked thing is a little bit more conceptual for me. I haven't tested this yet. I don't know how practical it is, but a lot of people use Padme to counter Kylo Ren Unmasked, and when that happens, the only way... So Padme can kill all the rest of the team except for him and OG Kylo. They're immune to the courage effects, which means that Padme has to do real damage to hurt this team. However, he regenerates so much health and protection every time he gets hit that it doesn't actually do enough. They don't do enough damage to actually get him down. So if you put tenacity on him, if you put a lot of tenacity on him, and Jedi Anakin can't actually get his healing immunity off on Kylo Ren Unmasked, then they can time out. Like, granted, that someone else will be able to come in and finish him off, but you still get a hold against a team that normally is pretty automatic, and people don't check his tenacity. I don't know how practical it is to get him super high tenacity, but I want to look into that sometime. Zalbar is another one who, this can work sometimes. I don't use Zalbar too often, to be honest, but the awesome thing about him with tenacity is if you don't put daze on him or stun him, he's going to proc that immediate passive taunt. And so, and whenever he's taunting, he's also going to be hitting you back. So you hit Zalbar, he hits you back, then Mission hits you back. They heal each other, everything is great. He's a really annoying tank if you have high tenacity. If he's easily stunned or dazed, not so much. So there's some characters that need tenacity. What other characters? Let me know in the comments. I do have 2 different trios here I want to discuss, though. So first we have Luke and his interaction with the rest of the Rebel team. Now, not the whole team. The whole team doesn't need tenacity, but what happens is you get Chupio and... oh, that's the wrong one. You have Chupio, and what he does, he gains 40% of the leader's max health, all this stuff, and tenacity at the start, and then all the rebels on his team gain half that amount. So he gains 40% of what the leader has, and the other rebels gain 20%, including the leader. So what happens, guys, you're going to be facing teams like General Grievous, who wants to debuff you, and more specifically, you're going to be facing General Skywalker, who wants to daze your team. And you can't afford to have your characters dazed, especially not Chewbacca or Chupio, because they're not going to be protected. They're not going to be guarded, rather. Guarding makes it so that you can't have those debuffs on you anyways, but Chewie can only do that on 2 characters. And so Chupio, if you give him some tenacity, you can see he's got 118%. If he grabs some tenacity from Luke, my Luke has over 100 tenacity. He gains 40% more tenacity, so he's right at 160%. Not too bad. But then he also hands 20 more to Chewbacca, who he's doing so many assists. We don't want him to get dazed or stunned. And he's already got 156. He's going to be gaining another 20% from Luke indirectly because of Chupio. And Luke, as you can see, he's got extra tenacity. I also have crit avoid on him, but that's for 3v3. He has 106% tenacity. He's handing it out to everyone through Chupio, and it's a pretty nice little combo there. He's also got offense set. My Luke is actually well modded. I have to brag a little bit, but the fact is, guys, this is a really good combo to make your team really tough to crack. Han doesn't care as much because he's protected. C-3PO, no one likes that whiny little guy anyways, so we can move on. This team is really good if you set it up with tenacity. It's not too high of a cost. I should add also, Chewbacca, people would think that he's not going to do any damage with pure tenacity sets, but the thing is, his main source of damage comes from percent health damage, which you guys can look at in his kit. Now, the second one is going to be the General Grievous droid team. A lot of people mock me for putting tenacity on B2, and a lot of times it doesn't matter, but if you put a lot of tenacity on B2, what happens is he is going to be tough to daze, and he's going to be tough to stun. Nothing is sadder in this game than a dazed B2, because you can't cleanse it really, not easily, and you can't, he can't move. He's slow. He's slow because no one wants to give him speed, and if they do give him speed, I will mock them derisively. So give him crit avoid, give him tenacity up, and make it so that he can't be debuffed. Meanwhile, his potency will build over time. He has decent potency to start with, but his potency will build over time due to General Grievous's kit, which you can read yourself. Similarly, Magna Guard, if he's taunting and you can't daze or stun him, he is super obnoxious. You can get stuck behind him. B2 is going to be getting a ton of turns because you're hitting someone besides B2. And if that happens, then you're going to be feeding turn meter to the rest of the team. B1's going to be going. It's going to be a huge mess. And Magna Guard wants to be survivable, but more than that, he wants to be an obnoxious little a-hole. And that means giving him lots of tenacity. Now, he doesn't have a ton of tenacity base, but 137 doesn't look like much until you look at B1. B1 doesn't care about tenacity nearly as much, but he cares about potency and offense. But What he really cares about here, or what the others care about, is based on his stacks, he's giving buffs to everyone. He's giving crit avoid, he's giving all this stuff, but he gives 0.5% tenacity to all of his separatist allies. That means at the start of his turn with 100 stacks, he's giving all of his friends 50% more tenacity. So that means my B2 is over 200% tenacity. That means my Magna Guard is at 180% tenacity. It is obnoxious AF, guys, and that's because of his utility. Now, here's some characters that you can actually get some tenacity from. You have Jedi Revan. This isn't from you. You're not getting tenacity from these characters. You're getting this is an alternative to tenacity. Now he starts with tenacity up on his entire team if they're all Jedi, and that's pretty good. Tenacity up is better than having natural tenacity, and he's oftentimes paired with Grandmaster Yoda. With Grandmaster Yoda handing out tenacity up like candy, this team does not really need high tenacity base. IG-11 doesn't necessarily need high tenacity. What it does is if you put him with scoundrels, every time he takes a turn, he just dispels all the debuffs on all the scoundrels. So he's like having, in a way, he's like having high tenacity, because if everyone gets debuffed, he just goes, takes a turn, everyone's debuffs go away, and you're happy. Padme has another mechanic here that kind of allows you to ignore tenacity, because when she and her team are generating all of her protection up, anytime someone has protection up, it means they cannot be debuffed. They're immune to debuffs, and therefore she's able to make it so that you can kind of just ignore a lot of debuffs. And not to mention there's a lot of cleansing on that team. They're not really needful of high tenacity. Rex is another guy who he's kind of plug and play. I mean, he's best with 501st, etc. But he's kind of nice because he's got tenacity up on everyone if he wants. He's got on that same move, he's got a cleanse. He takes a lot of turns. He's a good character for just kind of making sure your team doesn't need tenacity. Wat Tambor is another character who kind of makes it so that tenacity isn't needed. You can put his tank tech on someone and make it so that they don't get, well, they can get debuffed when they take their turn. They dispel all those debuffs before their turn actually starts, so they can still move, assuming there's not something else stopping them, like an irresistible or an undispellable stun from Supreme Leader Kylo, or like plague plus stun, something like that. So Wat is another one who facilitates the lack of tenacity. Now, where can you find tenacity if you need it? Here's some ideas. Now, Mon Mothma is restricted to Rebel fighters only, but what happens with them is you take all the Rebel fighters in the group, you combine all of their tenacity, their whole stats, so if they have like 400 tenacity added together, you take 8% of that, so that's like 40% tenacity, and you hand it to every single member, including Mothra, and it makes it so the team is very difficult to debuff. Now, this is really handy when it comes to facing teams like General Grievous, when they're super buff or debuff heavy. It's nice in the initial part of the fight to remain without any debuffs. Eventually, Grievous is going to be able to claw his way into it because he gains potency so quick, but you can see that my Mon Mothma has a decent amount of tenacity, and she gains more from her team. Now, Farm Boy Luke is worthless for almost every single thing other than having a strangely tan face these days, but the one nice thing about him, the only saving grace, don't put a Zeta on his lead. Please don't do it. Unless you just don't want to be good at this game. In which case, why are you watching my videos? But 45% tenacity on all allies. So if he dies, that's still fine. Nest is happy with 45% tenacity. Because sometimes she doesn't want to face a Padme team because they'll be able to debuff her. You put him in lead, and granted, doesn't do anything else for her. He just dies, and you lose banners, but she gains 45% tenacity off of that. Now, similarly, Hermit Yoda, you can use him with Nest if you really want, and if you use his master's training, he gives 50% tenacity to Jedi, 25% to non-Jedi. Nest is not a Jedi, so she's getting 25%. I know that's a surprise. You guys had no idea she wasn't a Jedi, I'm sure. But 25%, so she's gaining 25 from Hoda, 45% from Farm Boy. That's a cool, 70% on top of whatever she has. It's a pretty high tenacity. tenacity. Granted, you're going to lose banners if you do this, but sometimes you just need the win, and it's going to be nice. Bosk is another character. I actually didn't have him in my previous video, but he's a source of tenacity for his entire bounty hunter team. On his lead, he is, as long as everyone, so everyone gains extra protection. They also gain 50% tenacity on top of that. So if you build them all with a lot of tenacity, it makes it really tough to debuff them. Not to mention they can cleanse now with Grief Karga and all of that. In addition to that, he just gains extra tenacity from something, I believe. Maybe I'm just taking crazy pills, but at the very least, he's gaining it from his lead, and I don't do that. Personally, I like a fast Bosk, but that is a way to get extra tenacity on bounty hunters if you need it. Similarly, look at Django's lead. He actually does something like that too. He needs the Zeta, of course, but that's an option. I don't like it as much as Bosk lead, frankly. But Bastila, finally, the last on the list, folks. We have her initiative here. She gains, so if she's the lead, she's giving all of her buddies extra tenacity, 150% tenacity on top of it. That's a huge amount. That is ridiculous. It's really cool though. And so you start the fight not being able to really be debuffed unless they have some crazy high potency. And that can really be a huge advantage if that's something you're looking for. Specifically, I just recently used it against a Jedi Master Luke team who was going to use F-Lux right away, and I didn't want everyone to get ability blocked immediately. So, that being said, folks, I'm going to let you go here. This video has gone a little longer than the last one, just because that the short video actually elongated a bit. But give me feedback, guys. If you like this, please leave a comment, give a thumbs up, all of that. Really appreciate all of you. Sorry we had to reshoot, but probably a lot of you watching this far in haven't actually watched the previous one. So that being said, folks, thank you all so much for watching. And remember that in all things, Xaereth prevails.